Hey folks, welcome back. Thank you subscribers for coming back. In this video, we're going to progress a little further. Things are getting a little bit uncomfortable because I'm learning new things. I don't want to wreck stuff, but I'm learning. I'm going to teach you what I learned, and maybe you can get in there and do things with a little more confidence. I feel like I'm going down in the fog sometimes and I don't know where the end of the road is, but anyways. In this video, we're going to take the nose cone off. You can see it's already been removed from the car. First time I've done that, I wanted to take the nose cone off. I didn't want to wreck anything, so I was careful with that. And then I got thinking about my steering box, my steering gearbox, and it's been acting kind of funny. It feels okay. I've never owned a 38 Plymouth before, so I'm not really sure what the steering is supposed to feel like. And it's not a white knuckler, hang on, down the highway. It's not like that. But somehow, the way it was supposed to be sealed up was compromised. It wouldn't hold gear oil or grease. So I got the engine out, I got the nose cone off. I could literally get in the engine bay and work inside of there. Now's the time to take out the steering gearbox and dig in. And I've never touched the steering gearbox before in my life. I've never seen, I think, a worm gear assembly in person, just seen it in books and read about it. But we need to get in there, we need to learn. So in this video, I'm going to take the steering gearbox apart, show you what I found. I learned how to set it up, and how it works. And it was a little uncomfortable taking it apart because I thought, is this going to go back together? But it's not that hard, actually. I just dug out my books, I dug out my motor's manual, my original shop manual as well, and my parts manual. I looked at things. I watched a video online. Somebody else had the original Chrysler video from the 50s. That helped me. And it got apart. Here we go. Enjoy. Learn. Just take the nose cone off, they said. It'll be fun, they said. Well, I am going to take it off. I'm probably halfway there, I guess, or maybe a little more than half. But this hardware on here is like, it's been on here for like almost, 85 years. So a lot of it had to be cut out. These little splash pans and stuff that sit up in here. I got to get up there and unbolt some more fancy stuff up in that area. And see if we can't get this bad boy off. I have a spare nose cone. I'm thinking of putting it on because this one's kind of chewed up a bit. I found a spare one for sale for a good deal, so I bought it. This one's had a few hits. Maybe teenagers learning to drive. Parallel parking. So, anyways, it's coming off. We'll progress. We shall succeed here. Pretty big gaping hole here in one fender. Well, but we're gonna get her. Close. I'm here to tell you that this is a bit of a pain in the butt. Pain in the buttocks. Didn't go that simple. Lots of rusted hardware. This corner over here, I could tell, has been apart before. And I think maybe somebody did some body work or something over here because some of the hardware wasn't even there that should have been there, missing. That's a clue to me. The other thing I noticed was this little tool here. Don't tell my wife it's her Dremel. And when you got to grind off and cut off bolt heads in tight areas, and a grinder won't fit in there, and I don't have oxyacetylene, this works. It's basically like a little rotating pencil with a grinder wheel on it. I think it's for crafts, but it works pretty well. Let's do it. Come on, baby. Let's be friends. Oh, yes. Well, that was a pain in the ass. But it's going to be a lot easier to put that engine in with that off. You know, I'm reminded that this is indeed a hobby. I don't know. Paying someone to do this stuff, I can't imagine. It takes a lot of time to get this stuff apart. I probably got 3-4 hours of my time this afternoon just to get that nose cone off. There's a lot of rusted pieces, a lot of damage, bent pieces, broken bolts, just rusted to shit. So we got her. And I do have a spare nose cone. I think I'm gonna. The only holdup is it's not green. It's not painted. It's not gonna match my car, so you kind of feel like you just kind of cracked open, you know, the can of tuna right on the edge. You gotta open the thing up. You gotta open the whole lid off it. And I'm really trying not to do that, because if you start painting things, where do you stop? Where do you stop? Get the fenders off, hang those up, get a compressor, get a paint gun, learn how to paint. I don't know, I'm just a fool, I guess. We'll get through it. Well, as we progress through things here this winter, I'm this far in, I figure I gotta take a look at the steering gearbox. I don't really have any experience with these steering gearboxes, but that's okay. We're gonna plow ahead, do some research, ask some questions. I'll walk you through what I'm gonna do. Maybe you'll see my mistakes and learn from them. I like learning the hard way, it seems. What's happening is at the end of the steering gearbox, it looks like a poppet valve, and it goes up, the horn wire goes right through the center of it, and it falls out and it flops around. So it's not retained in there somehow. There's something missing. I can't quite figure out what's wrong yet. So in order to get the steering gearbox out, I've got to pull the steering wheel off, take the drag link off, that's the steering drag link on the other side in the fender well, and unbolt it and lift the whole thing out, the steering column, and the gearbox comes out with it. So I'm progressing. I degreased all that. I took a bunch of solvent to it and a solvent brush. I cleaned it all up. Lots of grease in that area. There's a couple places there for when you're doing your maintenance, you're greasing that. So as you know, that attracts rocks, pebbles, dust, grease is just a mess. So I've degreased it with much solvent and a solvent brush. And now I'm working in the inner fender well to take the drag link off. I'll show you that. I'm going to get that gearbox out and have a look at it. All right, here we're down in the fender well. This is called a steering arm. This is the drag link down here on the bottom. When you turn the wheels, the drag link, here you go, you're turning this forward and back, and then the steering wheels pivot on the kingpins. This is called the drag link here. So I've taken that big nut off. There was a lock washer there, and that's spline. So our next trick is to put a puller on it. Pull it off. Get it out of the way. Hopefully. All right, I gave it a good whack. Tap. I just kept banging with my hammer and not loosened it up. And it did just come off. There we go. It does appear to be indexed, so it can only go on one way. Makes sense. There's different gaps in the splines here. Feels like it could use a little grease. Get to that later, clean it up. I guess we'll go off to the steering wheel next. You know, once in a while, when you're doing stuff that you've never done before, the horn button. One wire goes down through the end of the steering gearbox there. Basically, push the horn in, disconnect the battery so it's not beeping on you the whole time, and then hold it down and twist it to the right, and it pops out. So this wire is a ground wire. When you push the horn, you connect the circuit. It basically goes live to the horn and waits there until you push the button, then it completes the circuit and goes to ground. And once in a while you think, you know, okay, I gotta get this out, I gotta get this bolt off. This is the easy stuff, but you stop and you second guess what you're doing because you're thinking, you know, I pull all this wire out of there. Could be fun to get back down there. It's kind of like trying to stuff a spaghetti noodle down in a hole, a cooked one. But we will figure out. I think maybe just a coat hanger. Get that out. That was too easy. Nothing to that. Okay, guess I need to figure out how to pull the steering wheel. Can't say I've ever done that before either, but see what I got. You know, despite the fact that that steering gearbox doesn't want to hold any grease or oil because the end of it, the plug keeps coming out, it feels good. It turns nicely. Oh, there's some 80-year-old dirt in there. Wonder if I should get that looked at. Okay, I don't have a steering wheel puller. I don't know. It's time to head back and to the internet and ask some more questions, I guess. Figure out what I'm going to use. I got a feeling maybe it's going to bite back here and pull off the splines, pull it forward. I will be back. Let's go see what we can find. Maybe I'll show you the end of this. See, this is what I'm talking about. See this here? So, this is why I'm going to pull this out. Alright, I went online and did a little research and found that these steering wheels can be a little challenging to pull off. So we've got a bearing splitter here on the back side, bolts down, the back flange of the steering wheel there, and a 2-jaw 6-inch puller. I'm going to crank on her. I put the nut back on, a few threads, hopefully to stop it from coming off and hit me in the face. And I'll crank on it and see what happens. Alright, so 6-inch 2-jaw puller. I just threaded on that and it made a little noise when it broke free. And is that pretty much easy. It came off. And it is not splined. There's a keyway in there. I thought it was splined. Tapered with a keyway. There's what I used. Voila. Learned something new today. Alright, I guess the next job is unbolt the steering box, slide it right out. Well, I gotta take this bracket off here too. Alright, there was 3 bolts down the bottom side of the steering gear that went through the frame with a nut and the lock washer. Took those 3 bolts out, pulled the steering wheel off. Let's see if I can get this out of here. There we go. Steering gear is out. It's been, apparently, this little piece is not supposed to really come out of there. The horn wire goes through this, and then it's designed to be up inside and protect the wire, so it's above the oil level. That comes up here somewhere, but it's not supposed to come out of there. I'm going to take these 4 bolts out and take this cap off and have a look and see what I can do here. Because that's not supposed to be happening. And I can't keep oil in my gearbox if it just keeps dripping right out. I did put grease in there, but as soon as the engine got hot, the grease dripped out too. So we shall get to the bottom of this. Alright, so I unbolted this to have a look at it. And from what I can tell, this plate here is slightly cupped, it's not square. And something's been milling into the back side of the plate here. There's probably maybe a 10th thou ridge there in the center. That would be this. It's part of the bearing. It's a cone. The cup there. Those go together. I'm guessing. So that's been putting pressure on this plate here and it's starting to chew itself up. It's actually bent. So I think I'm going to have to go further, take this cover off, have a look. I've never been in one of these before. Totally new to me, but that doesn't feel good to me. I don't know. We shall see. At this point, I'm just trying to figure out how things go together. I've never had one apart. So taking that cover off, and I put it back on a couple times, just trying to wrap my head around everything. And then I go and I study pictures and I look at things. And I just really want to make sure I grasp things before I get too far in, because this is all got to go back together. They're not making 1938 Plymouth steering boxes anymore. The light bulb kind of maybe sort of went off. I don't know a damn thing about these. They look pretty simple. And I've never worked on one before, but looks pretty straightforward. We'll be back after we educate ourselves further. I want to have a good look at the worm gear. Look for wear on that worm gear. See if any shims happen to fall in there that come out of the roller shaft that goes out the side there that connects up to the steering link arm. I didn't see any shims. And I suspect, I'm trying to wrap my head around it, the fact that there was no shims left in the end cover for the steering shaft and the worm gear here kind of has me thinking that it has seen adjustments. You take out shims to tighten up end play on the bearings, and all the shims are gone. There's nothing left to tighten up anymore. And the worm gear bearing was chewing itself into the cover there. I mean, I guess there's a chance that that bearing is just worn out, sloppy. Added a lot of grease in there and crap. Oh, the trials and tribulations of working at home. I did look at the, this is called, I think, the roller shaft. This turns nicely, and I don't see any wear in that gear. You know, it's a little shiny where it's making contact, but it looks clean. It's not scored. It turns nicely. The bearing in there is nice and tight. I don't think this needs to be touched. think there's needle bearings inside there. Feels really good. So we'll carry on and clean up that worm gear and see if we can get a look at that. And maybe there's a bearing on this end of the worm gear shaft here and on this end over here. This one we've got out. Maybe if I was to replace these two bearings, I could get all my settings back and get my shims back in place. And you know, maybe that'll do it. We shall see. We're learning, but we did read a little bit. Watch the videos that I've been able to find. The Imperial website is really good. It explains how to adjust and set this up and troubleshoot. So I'm no expert, but you folks that want to follow along and be entertained here and see what I'm doing, I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly every little thing about this because it's new to me. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I will continue to make videos and share my findings and help you out as best I can. Okay, I'm going to try and clean that up with a rag here. See if we can get a look at those bearings. So I've got my whole steering shaft here on the bench, and here, of course, the far end down here, there's a little keyway. I popped it out of the end of the steering shaft here at the very end. There's a bushing inside there. After that keyway comes out, you can slide the entire gear and shaft right out. That's the end bearing on this end. The worm gear, it sits like that in the housing. Slide that right out. And we can look at our gears and our bearings here. And there's the whole shaft out. I can get a good look at that worm gear there. And it looks pretty good, actually. I don't see a ton of scarring or scoring down inside of there. I just can't quite 100% wrap my head around the shims that go on the end of the cover plate. It sits like that. Bearing on each end supporting it. The cone for that bearing is inside here. And it spins, I don't know, it feels okay. But for some reason, this is milling itself into the end cap. Just haven't quite got my head wrapped around that yet. That end cap sits like that. When it's all together. And that bearing is chewing itself into there. So if they had shims on there, when we put shims on there and tighten things down, we're putting a preload on this bearing here. These both bearings, they'll be squished up. That'll be squished up into the cone inside there. As we take out bearings, I guess we allow, what do? We take out shims, we must allow more room. We add shims to tighten it up. Think about this. Just can't seem to wrap my head around it. It sits in there. There's shims on the back side of this. Oh, the shims are going to move this plate out, right? Or if we take out a shim, it gets tighter and tighter. So as we take out shims, we increase the preload on the bearing. We remove a shim, this gets tighter and tighter as it's bolted down, which puts the end load on here, which tightens this up. So when I took it apart, there was no shims. There was some gasket material there. I didn't see a shim. This is all that was in there. Just like a little piece of paper, big gasket. That's like paper thin, like maybe 1/2 thou paper. What is this? That feels more like a gasket too. It's like paper, thicker. I don't know, is that all the shims are in there? Is that what you call a shim? Paper gaskets, bunch of them, extremely thin. So perhaps I put a new bearing here on this end, a new bearing on this end. Maybe that'll pull everything tight again. Then I add some new shims, tighten things back up. Maybe it'll be okay. In order to change that cup inside of there, sitting right there, you can kind of see it. There's the cup for the inner or upper bearing mount. Press into the housing there. Take this bolt off, take the tube out probably, then I could punch that out. So I'm thinking 2 new bearings. If I can get that. Timken X6-C. I think the shaft looks good, it's straight. The threads are in good shape. The keyway was in good shape. Okay, finally. Eureka. I finally see something that makes me believe that I can fix this. I had this wear, I couldn't quite figure out why. The bearing was chewing into the end cover on the steering gear. This is the roller cage at the end of the worm gear, the far end of the steering gear box. Look at these little raised parts here. That is a very worn cage. See the bearing here, cylinder bearing, is chewing its way up into this part of the cage. They're getting sloppy in there. This is the one at the upper end. It looks fine. It's not holding the stress and the weight of the steering wheel and everything on the end of it. This one is. So, those are allowing extra movement in the bearing. You can see them moving there. And I'm going to guess that that's what's allowing this part of the cone, this section right here, that sits like that. That's chewing into this end cap, scoring its way into here. That's a guess, but at least there's a clue here that we're onto something. I think we got her. So I'm gonna go see if I can get this bearing ordered up. I really should replace them both. This one looks a lot better, and if I could get the cone out, I could get a part number off of it and replace them both. I'm gonna see what I can do. But finally, I'm happy to see that we found some clue as to what's going on. I managed to get the seal out, but my slide hammer is just too big. So I'm kind of excited and glad that I found another use for my pilot bearing puller. I struggled to get a pilot bearing out last summer, and I gave up doing the grease and the bread thing and the whole kind of trickery to try and get a pilot bearing out. So I bought a puller. It wasn't expensive. And what I did is I put my pilot bearing puller down here. I tightened it in the seal. And then I grabbed my slide hammer and I went around this bushing here and bang! Pulled it out. Wasn't much. So I'm going to try and update that to a modern seal. That goes over this shaft here. So I can use the shaft dimensions, get the seal dimensions, try and order something better. Because that's an old rawhide seal. I'm not putting one of those back in. I don't think so. But I'm struggling to get this. There's a bearing cone right in here inside the housing. I cannot seem to get it out. So I might have to phone a friend. See if I can get him to get it out. Not sure. I've tried tapping it, everything from this end. I just can't get in there and tap it out. It's a tight fit. I tried my bearing puller in there. That doesn't work. If these fingers here were a little bit shorter, I might be able to grab it, but they're just too long. By the time I get to the bearing, I'm at a stroke room inside of there. I can't get it out. So I don't know. Buying another puller doesn't really excite me all that much to try and find something that'll fit in there, but maybe it's an option. So there was so much pressure on this end plate that was actually bent, slightly curved, and that allowed this end piece to slide out. It's pressed in. So I put the plate in a vise and I straightened it. And then this went in, I pushed it in, and it's tight now. So it just kind of goes to show you how much stress can be on that steering shaft over 80 years. The bearing wears. Bearing sits here, forces this out. Was milling into there. And the plate was bent. Cool, I think we're on the right path. I think we're getting there. We're making progress. I think we got this. Well, as you can see, we're not going to wrap up this video or this job actually today. Well, end the video here at this point. I've got to now order parts, and from what I can see, I found a company online that's based in Argentina that remanufactures and makes high quality replacement parts and kits, rebuild kits for these Gemmer steering gearboxes. So I'm going to go to them and order my parts. It's going to be a while. It's unfortunate, but that's part of the fun of having an old car. So I'll probably be, it'll be well into the spring probably by the time I get the gearbox back together. So as you watch through this video, you can see that the video took place over about a week, and I really didn't know what I was doing when I started this project. And you could literally see the gears turning in my head and the steam coming out of my ears as I learned more and more about what was going on with this gearbox. And I was trying to understand why it was doing what it was doing. And if you can understand why and research the theory and how it's designed and why it does what it does and what it's supposed to do, you kind of start, clicking the dots, connecting the dots. And I'm only human, and I was learning as I go, and everybody learns at different speeds and maybe picks things up sooner, and you could kind of follow along. As in the beginning of the video, I was just really not having a clue, just taking stuff apart slowly. Don't be banging stuff hard and prying and ripping stuff. It went together somehow. It's lasted almost 83 years now. Don't destroy it taking it apart. Take your time and do your research. Learn. So as I got further along the project, I kind of understood and found and started inspecting things, and then I kind of, bing, a light came on, and I kind of realized what was going on. So I'm just going to summarize my learnings, because I did know this at the beginning of the video. But as we stack shims, this is the end of the steering gearbox here. As we stack shims behind this, it pulls it away, and it takes, so a brand new bearing, everything's nice and new, it's going to be, thick. As the bearing wears, it gets sloppy. We take shims out and we drop this down tighter and tighter and tighter. We continue to take shims out to keep the bearing within spec we want. We want to keep, and it's done by feel. My understanding is you move the steering wheel, and if it's too tight, there's too much end play on the bearing, you're going to get a tight steering wheel. It's not going to want to return to center easily. It's when you let go of the steering wheel, it's not going to want to come back to center after a turn. So it's kind of it sounds like it's a feel thing, trial and error. Put it back together, put the shims in, and start with a stack of shims. I don't know how deep, but I'll figure that out when I go to reinstall it. And as the bearing wears, you take out shims. The other part I wanted to explain that I didn't know and now I understand is this gear is cut. There's a radius. It's the outside edge of an imaginary circle. There's a radius here, and this gear is also cut with a different radius. They're different. And as this wears, as it turns, this thing actually turns like this when you steer. It spins. And when you're up at this end of the radius up here at this end of the worm gear like that, the tolerance is tight. If it's too tight, it'll bind. If you've got too much end load on this shaft here to position it against this roller gear, it'll bind in that position and it won't want to return easily. So then when we go to the center, when we go back and we're down here in like this part of the gear, the steering wheel is straight, we're going to have a little bit of slop there, because as we go to the other end down here, it binds up again at this end. So the thing is literally sweeping like this back and forth up that radius of that worm gear on my left there. There's going to be some slop. There's two adjustments we can make. We can move this in or out this way, and that's done with the cover over top of this side gear here. And then there's the bearing play, and we adjust that by shimming up and down like this. So by shimming it up and shimming it this way and back, we're going to end up with the right amount of play in the worm gear assembly that'll get us good steering. I'm not going to go through every single step on how to do that because I got to refresh myself again, honestly. But it's in the manuals. Get some books. I guess what I'm trying to get to is you can do this. It's not hard. I really didn't know what I was doing other than I'm just taking my time and reading and researching and understanding what's going on. So now I've got parts coming. We're going to reuse our gears, new shims, new bearings, new seals, put it back together, and start setting it up by feel. And instructions are all in the manuals how to do that. So I'll be at that in a few months, I guess, when the parts arrive. All right, so hopefully this is helpful. If you kind of like what you've seen, hit the subscribe button in the bottom right corner of your video there, and follow along. And I'll keep trying to teach you guys some stuff. Maybe I'll wrap up with a B-roll. I'll walk around my car. Everybody seems to like these B-rolls. I hear about it. I don't know, but you can kind of get a good look at my car.